When winter settles over a small mountain town, the world grows quiet in a way that feels almost sacred. Snow drifts across empty roads like pages of an old story turning themselves, and shadows stretch long beneath the pines as if the valley is holding its breath. But on one frozen morning, something broke the silence. A wounded German shepherd stumbling out of the forest, dragging behind him a small bundle that would change every life in Coldwater Valley. This is the story of courage that refused to die in the cold, and of the miracle that arrived on four shaking legs when no one expected it. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. I would love to see your town in the comments. Morning did not truly rise over Coldwater Valley. It drifted in like a hesitant ghost. The winter light, pale as old bone, slid across rooftops weighed down by a night of endless snowfall. The mountains surrounding the town stood like ancient guardians draped in white shrouds, their ridgelines softened under the thick quilt of frost. It was the kind of morning where the world looked as though it had paused to remember something painful. Coldwater Valley was a quiet mountain town in northern Wyoming, known for its brutal winters, its stubborn population of 2,000 people, and a main street that still had wooden boardwalks instead of sidewalks. The air tasted of pine, metal, and the faint sting of approaching storm pressure, a reminder that winter here did not simply visit. It consumed. Elias Turner, age 38, temporary sheriff of the valley, guided his patrol truck through the sleepy streets. He was a tall man, over 6 feet, built with the broad, rugged frame of someone molded by both military service and mountain life. His dark blonde hair was cut short and neatly kept, though a streak of premature silver ran above his right temple like an old scar made visible. His eyes, a muted blue, held the weight of someone who had weathered loss and learned to carry it quietly. Elias was respected in town for his even temper and steady judgment, but a tragedy 5 years ago, the car accident that took his younger brother, had carved a soft sorrow into the edges of his personality. Since then, responsibility came to him as naturally as breathing, and he bore it without complaint. He was halfway through ending his morning patrol when the radio crackled sharply, breaking the soft hum of the heater. A nurse's voice burst through, high, frightened, breathless. "Emergency at Coldwater General. There's a dog trying to force its way into the lobby, and it's dragging something. Sheriff Turner, it looks like a child." Elias slammed on the brakes, the truck fishtailed slightly on fresh powder before straightening. "On my way," he answered, though the nurse had already stopped transmitting. Coldwater General Hospital sat at the edge of town, its windows fogged with condensation from heat battling the ruthless cold outside. When Elias pushed through the glass doors, the air inside felt unnaturally still, as though every soul within had inhaled sharply and forgotten how to exhale. The scene waited like a photograph. A German shepherd stood in the center of the tile floor, its entire coat soaked and matted with snow. The dog was large, around 4 years old by the look of its eyes, with thick sable fur that should have gleamed but now appeared dull from frost and dirt. A long gash cut across its left shoulder blade, dried blood frozen into stiff crimson crystals. Its breath came harsh and shallow, plumes of white vapor rising with every exhale. And between its teeth, clamped with trembling determination, was a knitted red scarf wrapped around a small body. A girl around 8 years old. She lay limp on the slick floor, her face pale blue from cold, her lips cracked, her hair tangled with pine needles. The dog had dragged her across the ice from somewhere deep in the forest. That much was instantly clear. Nurse Sarah Whitmore, who had called in the emergency, hovered nearby. Sarah, 42, was a slender woman with curly auburn hair she kept tied in a loose knot. She had kind hazel eyes, but a manner of speaking that could cut through chaos like a scalpel, something shaped by years working in emergency rooms across the state. Her childhood had been marked by an alcoholic father who vanished for days at a time, and though that wound never fully healed, it made her fiercely protective of children who arrived in her care. This morning, however, her usual composure fought a losing battle against pure shock. He just came through the doors," Sarah stammered. "Dragged her across the snow. He wouldn't let anyone take her." Her voice trembled on the last word. The dog took one step back as the medical team approached, but did not snarl, did not bare its teeth. Instead, its gaze locked on Elias with a kind of desperate intelligence, pleading, exhausted, yet resolute. Elias knelt slowly, lowering himself to the dog's eye level. "It's all right," he murmured softly. "You got her here. You did good." A soft whine escaped from the animal's throat, and its legs shook from exhaustion. The scarf slipped from its mouth, and the dog gently nudged the girl with its nose, as though urging the humans to finish what it had begun. 2 EMTs swept in. One of them, Ben Ortiz, a 30-year-old paramedic built like a sturdy oak tree, with a trim beard and a calm presence that made even the worst emergencies seem manageable. Ben had served 2 tours overseas as a combat medic, and though he rarely spoke of it, everyone knew he carried scars beneath his uniform, both visible and not. Without hesitation, Ben scooped the child into his arms. "She's hypothermic," he said. "Pulse is weak, pupils responsive. Let's move." The team rushed the girl down the hallway toward the trauma room, wheels of the stretcher squealing across the tile. The dog stepped forward instinctively, but its injured leg buckled. Before it collapsed, Elias slid an arm under its chest, steadying it. Up close, he could feel the tremors running through the animal's body, pain, cold, fear all braided together. "Easy," Elias whispered. "You're safe now." The dog's amber eyes flicked up to him, and for a brief second, the world narrowed to just the 2 of them. Snow still clung to the dog's whiskers. Frozen breath clung to its muzzle. But inside, those eyes burned something fierce, loyalty sharpened by desperation, and a trust so naive and pure, Elias felt his throat tighten. "What's her name?" Sarah asked, already prepping warm blankets. Elias shook his head. "No collar, no tag, no chip." Sarah sighed. "Then how do we—" Before she could finish, the dog pressed its head gently against Elias's knee, leaning into him with the weary surrender of a creature that had used the last of its strength to deliver a miracle. Ben reappeared from the trauma room doorway. "Sheriff, the girl's alive. For now, she has severe hypothermia and bruising, but she's still hanging on." He hesitated before adding, "She kept whispering something as she warmed up. A name, maybe? Sounded like Lily." Elias felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Lily Parker. Missing 48 hours. Last seen leaving school with her former stepfather. A man with a violent history and a restraining order, ignored more often than obeyed. He looked down at the dog again. "You brought her home," he said gently. "Didn't you?" The German shepherd lifted its head and placed one trembling paw onto Elias's boot, an instinctive gesture of connection. For a moment, the entire hospital seemed silent. Even the machines in the trauma room felt quieter, as though the building itself paused to acknowledge the gravity of what had just occurred. Outside, the wind howled, scattering fresh snowflakes against the windows. Inside, winter finally seemed to take a breath. And in that breath, Coldwater Valley's quiet morning had already changed forever. Coldwater General Hospital had seen its share of winter injuries, frozen fingers, fractured ribs from snow shovels gone wrong, the occasional skier who believed gravity was optional, but nothing had prepared it for the sight of a German shepherd dragging an unconscious child through the frost-slicked lobby. Word spread through the halls like wildfire, echoing through break rooms and nurses' stations until the entire building seemed to hold its breath. Inside Trauma Room B, the fluorescent lights hummed with the unsettling neutrality of a place that had witnessed too much suffering. Lily Parker lay on a heated stretcher, her small frame wrapped in layers of thermal blankets, her skin slowly regaining a hint of pale pink under the warmth. Machines beeped softly beside her, steady, fragile, promising, but not yet certain. Outside the glass doors, the dog waited. The German shepherd, still without a proper name, stood in the hallway with an uneasy vigilance. Every time a nurse or doctor walked past, the dog's ears flicked up, its eyes tracking them with a raw blend of fear and protectiveness. The animal's coat was still matted from melted snow, and its wounded leg trembled beneath its weight. It smelled faintly of pine, dirt, and the metallic scent of dried blood. Elias Turner leaned against the wall opposite the dog, arms folded, observing it with the quiet intensity of a man who had spent his life reading danger and innocence in equal measure. His breath fogged slightly in the cold draft from the emergency exit, and he whispered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. "What happened to you out there?" Before he could think further, Dr. Miriam Hayes stepped out of the trauma room. She was a woman in her early 50s, short and sturdy, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a tight bun. Her no-nonsense demeanor came from decades of emergency medicine, but beneath that hardened surface lived a deep compassion, one shaped by losing her only son to a drunk driver many years ago. Her grief had not softened her, it had sharpened her, carving her into someone who refused to allow loss to win again if she could help it. "She's stable for now," Dr. Hayes said, rubbing warmth back into her fingers. "Severe hypothermia, bruising to the ribs, and she hasn't spoken much yet. But she's waking up slowly." Elias nodded. "The dog hasn't moved from that spot." Dr. Hayes followed his gaze. "I noticed. Animals like that. They don't do something this extreme without a reason. Whatever happened in the forest must have been bad enough to make it her only guardian." As if sensing their attention, the dog raised its head slightly, its amber eyes fixed on Elias, tired but unbroken. A moment later, Nurse Daniel Harper arrived with a clipboard tucked under one arm. Daniel, 27, was thin and lanky, with sandy blonde hair and an endearingly awkward smile. He had joined Coldwater General only last year after leaving a nursing job in Seattle, where burnout and overcrowded wards had worn him down. Coldwater was supposed to be a quiet place to rebuild himself. Today was not quiet. "She's beginning to mumble," Daniel reported. "Not full sentences yet, mostly fragments." "Fragments like what?" Elias asked. Daniel flipped through a few pages, scanning his notes. "A name, Lily Parker." She said it faintly, like she was remembering herself. "And a few words about a man and a cabin." Elias's jaw tightened. "Her stepfather?" Daniel hesitated. "There's more. She kept mentioning Frost." Dr. Hayes frowned. "Frost? A place?" Elias shook his head slowly. "I think she meant him." He glanced at the dog, who had lowered its head to rest against its paws, still trembling from pain and cold. The name seemed to fit. Not dramatic, not exaggerated. Just honest. Real. The kind of name that belonged to an animal who had survived the unforgiving winter and brought a child back through it. "Frost," Elias murmured. "Until we know more, that'll do." Suddenly, Frost pushed himself up, despite the tremor in his injured leg. His ears perked, head turning toward the trauma room. A muffled whimper escaped him. "She's waking," Daniel said. "He can probably hear her before we do." Elias stepped forward. "Let him come closer." A security guard nearby raised an eyebrow. "Sheriff, that's still a wild animal. You sure it's safe?" Elias crouched down beside the dog, placing a steady hand on Frost's thick neck. The animal leaned into the touch instantly, trusting him in the way only a creature who had run out of options could. "He's not a threat," Elias said softly. "He's the reason she's alive." The guard backed off, unsure but obedient. Together, Elias and Frost approached the trauma room door. Through the glass, Lily stirred weakly, her soft brown hair tangled against the pillow, her eyelids fluttering open with the disorientation of a child, waking from a nightmare she couldn't fully escape. She looked impossibly small in the wide, sterile bed. Elias stepped inside first, moving gently so as not to startle her. "Lily," he said softly, "you're safe now." Her eyes flickered toward him, searching for something recognizable. Her voice, when it came, was barely a breath. "The man." Elias swallowed. "You're in the hospital. No one here will hurt you." Her lips trembled. "The cabin. He took me there. He said no one would find me." Dr. Hayes stepped closer. "You don't need to talk about that now, sweetheart. Just breathe. You're warm. You're safe." But the girl shook her head faintly, and tears gathered in her eyes. "He hit the dog. He tried to make him leave. But Frost stayed with me." Her small hand reached weakly toward the doorway. Frost took that as his invitation. He limped inside, each step careful, trembling. Lily's breathing hitched, her eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition so deep it softened her entire expression. "Frost," she whispered, voice breaking. The dog lowered his head onto the edge of the bed, careful not to put weight on his wounded shoulder. Lily placed her hand against his muzzle, fingers sinking into damp fur. The dog closed his eyes and exhaled, a long, relieved sigh that carried the weight of the past 2 days. Elias stood at the foot of the bed, watching the exchange with a heaviness in his chest. Not sorrow, something different, something quieter, steadier, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself in a long time. Hope. Dr. Hayes cleared her throat gently. Sheriff Turner, we'll need full reports sent to social services. And the police investigation? I'll handle it, Elias said. His voice had a new edge, more resolute. But right now, she needs him. And then, as if responding to his words, Lily whispered again. He didn't leave me, not even when I cried. He just stayed by me. He kept me warm. Dr. Hayes nodded slowly. Then, he can stay a little longer. Outside the trauma room, the hallway had grown quiet. Snow tapped gently against the windows, the storm not yet ready to lift its grip on the valley. But inside the room, something steadier than any weather pattern held its ground, a bond forged in fear, in cold, in survival. Lily drifted back to sleep with her hand still resting on Frost's head. The dog did not move. Elias watched them for a long moment. Then he whispered, to no one in particular, to the winter-laden air itself. You brought her home. Now we'll figure out the rest. And Coldwater Valley, still buried under a blanket of snow, seemed to listen. Coldwater Valley never forgot a footprint, not in winter, not when fresh snow laid itself across the earth like an open notebook, waiting for the next line of a story it had no choice but to record. And on this night, when the storm quieted just enough for the search team to breathe, the forest stood like a cathedral carved from frost, silent, watching, remembering. Sheriff Elias Turner tightened his winter jacket as he stepped out of the hospital entrance, the cold air immediately biting at the exposed skin on his neck. The sky above was a slate-gray dome, swirling gently with flakes that seemed almost reluctant to fall. Flood lamps from 3 patrol trucks cast long beams into the woods ahead, illuminating tree trunks coated with layers of frost thick as candle wax. Behind Elias, the hospital doors opened again. Deputy Monica Reyes, 35, stepped out carrying a satchel of forensic markers. She was a compact woman with sharp features, deep brown eyes, and short black hair tucked under a wool cap. Years working missing person cases in Denver had carved a deep seriousness into her personality, though she balanced it with a wry humor that surfaced at the most unexpected times. Tonight, however, humor had no foothold. Snow's slowed down, Monica reported. If we're going to track anything, now's the moment. Elias nodded. We start where Frost entered town. She glanced at the German shepherd standing beside him. Frost wore a soft veterinary wrap around his injured leg, but he had refused to stay behind. The moment Elias opened the hospital doors, Frost had limped forward, insistent, eyes fixed toward the dark tree line, as if pulled by an invisible cord. Monica raised a brow. You sure he's up for this? He's still bleeding through that bandage. He's the only one who knows the way, Elias said. A third figure joined them, Ranger Tom Kelton, a 60-year-old search and rescue veteran, tall and thin, with a white beard that made him look like a mountain hermit. He had lived through more winters than anyone else in the valley, and moved with the slow, patient certainty of a man who knew the rhythm of the land better than he knew his own pulse. Forest's been stirred, Tom said, tapping the snow with his boot. Something big moved through not too long ago. Could have been them. Elias gestured toward Frost. Let him lead when he can, but we follow evidence first. The woods greeted them with the brittle crunch of ice beneath their boots and the faint moan of wind weaving its way through the branches. Headlamps carved thin tunnels of light through the darkness, illuminating spirals of snow dancing in the air. Frost walked a few paces ahead, nose low to the ground, breath steaming. They reached the edge of a clearing where the snow was disturbed in a pattern of dragging lines. Monica knelt to inspect it. This is where he dragged her. You can see the scarf, marks. Elias crouched beside her. The grooves were unmistakable, parallel streaks that cut through the snow like fragile scars. Pieces of red yarn stuck to a broken branch nearby. He must have carried her in his mouth by the scarf, Elias murmured, dragging her from spot to rest. Tom let out a soft whistle. That dog crossed half the ridge in a snowstorm, injured, with a child. Monica shook her head, her breath fogging in the cold. No ordinary dog does this. Elias didn't reply. He didn't need to. The truth hung in the air like frost on pine needles. They continued forward, this time guided not only by Frost's nose, but by a trail the forest itself had preserved. Small clumps of pine needles, a snapped branch, a smear of dirt where someone had stumbled. Every mark whispered a fragment of Lily's journey. After nearly an hour, Frost suddenly paused, ears forward. The clearing ended at a narrow game path winding between two old spruces. Frost nudged his nose toward the right, whining softly. He remembers something here, Elias whispered. Monica scanned the ground with her flashlight. There, boot prints, adult male, deep impact, wide stride. Elias followed the trail with his eyes. He was carrying her at this point. Tom traced another impression with the tip of his walking stick. Uneven gait, man was tired or angry. Or both, Monica muttered. Frost growled, a low, almost mournful sound. He pushed forward again, and the team followed. The path narrowed, twisted, and then dipped, leading to a cluster of trees bent by wind and time. Beneath them lay more evidence, footprints partially filled with snow, a broken branch with dried blood, and claw marks on a fallen log. But what caught Elias's eye was something else, lying half buried in snow, glinting faintly under the beam of his flashlight. A child's backpack, blue, torn at the strap, a small embroidered patch of a crescent moon. Lily's, Elias said, lifting it with gloved hands. He must have dropped it when Frost fought back. Monica exhaled sharply. So, the dog intervened before the guy could take her deeper. Tom pointed ahead. Cabin should be close. How do you know? Monica asked. Tom's eyes softened, a mix of sorrow and memory. Only one old cabin sits on this side of the ridge, abandoned years ago. Folks say it's haunted. By what? Monica raised a brow. Tom shrugged. Bad decisions? They continued, the forest thickening around them. Frost's limp grew more pronounced, but he did not stop. He glanced back at Elias occasionally, as if to reassure him. He knew what he was doing. He remembered every painful step. Finally, the trees parted. There it was. A crooked wooden cabin leaning against the slope, its roof blanketed with heavy snow. Smoke no longer rose from its chimney, but the faint warmth radiating from the doorframe told a story. Someone had been here not long ago. Elias motioned with his hand. Weapons ready. Monica drew her handgun. Tom unsheathed a small survival axe, more tool than weapon, but enough to defend himself if needed. As they approached, Frost suddenly stiffened. His hackles rose, breath steaming sharply. He sniffed the air, then lowered his body in an instinctive defensive posture. He's sensing something, Monica whispered. Elias pushed the door open with his boot. The hinges groaned like an old man waking from a nightmare. Inside, the cabin was small. One room, a stone fireplace, a cot, a table littered with empty cans, and a burnt-out lantern. Snow had blown in through a cracked window, forming a thin layer over the wooden floor. The smell of damp wood and cold ashes hung heavy. But the room's most chilling detail carved itself into view almost instantly. Carved into the wall. A message. No one takes her from me. The words were jagged, erratic, carved with a knife or some blunt metal tool. Snowflakes drifted through the broken window, settling onto the letters as if trying to bury them. Monica swallowed. He left in a hurry. Elias's jaw locked. And he's still out there? Frost paced slowly through the room, sniffing the cot, the hearth, the broken window. He whimpered once, a short, anxious sound, then looked back at Elias. Tom took off his gloves, warming his hands near the last trace of heat in the hearth. Fire died less than an hour ago. So he knew we were coming, Monica concluded. Elias stared at the carved message, the knife marks deep enough to splinter wood. A shadow of anger crossed his face, a rare, sharp expression in a man known for control. He thinks Lily belongs to him, Elias said quietly. We can't let him think that for another second. Frost nudged Elias's leg, as if echoing his determination. Elias knelt beside the dog, placing a firm, steady hand on his side. "We'll protect her, and we'll find him." Outside, the wind picked up again, sending a surge of snow swirling across the ridge. The forest had given its clues. Now it demanded action. Elias stood. "Let's move. This isn't over." And beneath the moonless winter sky, Coldwater Valley held its breath once more. Coldwater Valley slept in uneasy silence as the storm gathered strength once more, brushing snow against the hospital windows like skeletal fingers tapping for attention. The world outside was a blur of white and shadow, a winter veil that obscured danger far better than it hid mercy. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed with a sterile calm that belied the tremor of tension rising within the walls. Lily Parker slept in room 214, wrapped in soft blankets, her small chest rising and falling with fragile rhythm. The child had not spoken again after recounting fragments of her ordeal, but her hand still rested on Frost's fur whenever she drifted in and out of dreams. The dog lay curled beside the bed on a mat hastily arranged by the staff, his breathing shallow, his bandaged leg stretched stiffly. Exhaustion clung to him, yet his eyes remained half open, watching the doorway with a predator's instinct sharpened by trauma. Elias Turner stood just outside the room, speaking with Nurse Karen Abbott, a woman in her late 40s with kind brown skin, tightly braided hair, and a calm presence that had soothed countless patients over 2 decades. She had always been considered the anchor of the pediatric wing, a natural caretaker with warm eyes and an unshakable patience forged from raising 3 children on her own. "She's stable," Karen said, adjusting the chart on her tablet. "Her body temperature is almost normal. Vitals are good. Mentally, well, that's going to take time." Elias nodded. "I just need her safe tonight. Frost too." Karen smiled gently, though the worry didn't leave her eyes. "We'll keep watch." Elias wanted to believe her. He truly did. But the message carved into the cabin wall still burned in his mind. "No one takes her from me." Those words clung to him like ice. Downstairs, the night shift changed with the slow rhythm of a hospital accustomed to winter emergencies. One by one, nurses clocked in, technicians swapped badges, and security guards settled into their usual posts. Among them was Edwin Clark, a janitor in his early 50s with a slight limp and thick glasses. He moved with habitual precision, mop, bucket, wipe, his shoulders hunched as though trying to shrink from the world. He was soft-spoken, polite, and known around the hospital as Mr. Clark, the man who whistled old country tunes while cleaning night corridors. But tonight he wasn't whistling. Tonight he was late, and strangely quiet, and wearing a jacket zipped up too tightly for someone indoors. No one noticed the inconsistency. No one saw the anxious flicker in his eyes. No one saw the stolen hospital ID badge clipped inside his coat pocket. No one except Frost. The dog stirred the moment the elevator chimed down the hall. His ears perked, his muscles tensed beneath his injured frame. A growl began deep in his chest, not loud, not aggressive, but primal. Warning. Karen froze mid-step. "What's wrong, boy?" Elias turned sharply. Frost pushed himself to his feet with a painful jolt, limping to the doorway. His nose quivered, catching a scent the humans could not yet recognize. A scent tied to fear, to violence, to the cabin's darkness. Then Elias saw the figure approaching. Edwin Clark walked with his head down, shoulders stiff, hands tucked in his coat pockets. But the walk was wrong, the limp was forced, the shoulders too broad, and his eyes, cold, wild, darting toward Lily's room with unmistakable purpose. Elias's instincts ignited. "That's not Clark," he whispered. Frost growled louder. The imposter looked up, and in the stark hallway light, the truth landed like a blade to the spine. It was Victor Hale, Lily's former stepfather. His face was partially hidden beneath the mask of a janitor's uniform, his scruffy beard hastily trimmed, his expression taut with something raw and desperate. The stolen ID badge glinted as he moved. Victor's gaze locked directly onto Lily's room, onto her. Possession, obsession, madness, all burning in his eyes. Elias reached for his holster, voice low but sharp. "Victor Hale, don't move." The hallway froze. Victor tilted his head slightly, an eerie, unhinged smile creeping up the corner of his mouth. "She's my family. She belongs with me." Karen gasped and stepped back. Victor stepped forward. Frost erupted. The German shepherd lunged into the hallway, ignoring the agony in his leg. His claws scraped the floor, and he positioned himself squarely between Victor and Lily's door. His growl was no longer restrained. It was the sound of a wounded guardian who had seen death and refused to let it touch his child again. Victor reached into his coat for a knife. Elias drew his gun in one motion. "Drop it!" Victor didn't drop it. He rushed the door. Everything collapsed into chaos. Victor slammed a shoulder into the doorway, forcing his way inside. Lily woke with a scream, raw, terrified, the sound of a memory returning too quickly. Frost collided with Victor before the man could reach her. But it wasn't a perfect Hollywood tackle. It was a desperate, painful leap by a dog whose strength was nearly depleted. Frost's injured leg buckled midair, his body twisted. Instead of knocking Victor down outright, he crashed into the man's hip and sent them both stumbling toward the foot of the bed. Victor snarled and swung the knife. Frost dodged but lost his footing on the slick tile. Lily's scream rose higher. Elias charged inside, shoving a rolling tray aside. Instruments clattered across the floor. "Victor, drop the weapon!" Victor slashed wildly. The blade grazed Elias's jacket, tearing fabric. The world shrank into heartbeats, metal, breath. Frost lunged again, jaws snapping around Victor's forearm, not breaking skin, just forcing his hand open. The knife slipped. That was all Elias needed. He tackled Victor to the ground, pinning him with a force sharpened by rage and purpose. His knee pressed into the man's spine, his arm hooked around Victor's wrist. "You're done," Elias growled. Victor fought like an animal cornered, but pain, exhaustion, and Frost's relentless interference had weakened him. Elias grabbed the fallen handcuffs from his belt. With a metallic click, sharp, final, the cuffs locked around Victor's wrists. The room fell silent except for Lily's trembling sobs and Frost's labored breathing. Karen rushed to Lily, holding her close. Frost collapsed beside the bed, chest heaving, his body quivering from pain. Elias radioed for backup, his voice firm but shaking with adrenaline. "Suspect in custody. Medical assistance needed, now." Victor lay motionless on the tile, defeated eyes filled with hatred and something darker. Elias didn't look at him again. He looked at Frost, at the dog who had saved Lily twice in one lifetime, and Elias whispered, voice thick, "Good boy. You did it." Outside, the winter wind howled, not in menace but in release, as though the valley itself exhaled after holding its breath for too long. The wolf had returned, and this time, the wolf had lost. The hospital hallway returned to its thin, sterile stillness only after Victor Hale was dragged away in handcuffs, leaving behind a trail of melted snow, adrenaline, and the bitter metallic smell of panic. Orderlies whispered behind closed doors. Nurses walked faster than usual, and somewhere in the pediatric wing, the winter wind pressed its face against the windows, reminding everyone how close danger had come. Sheriff Elias Turner stood in the doorway of room 214, chest still rising too sharply, pulse still thudding in his ears. His jacket was torn where Victor's knife had grazed it. Frost lay on the floor beside Lily's bed, sides heaving. The bandage around his leg soaked through with fresh blood. His eyes fluttered, half conscious, half fading, and his breath rattled faintly. Karen Abbott knelt beside him, her gentle hands trembling. "He needs help immediately. This bleeding isn't stopping." Lily sat curled at the head of her bed, clutching her hospital blanket with both hands. Her lower lip quivered uncontrollably. Her small face, still pale from hypothermia, was now drowned in fear. "He's hurt," she whispered. "He's hurt 'cause he saved me again." Her voice broke on the last word. Elias stepped forward. "We'll fix him, I promise." But promises meant very little against the cold, brutal math of blood loss. Downstairs, the hospital's old supply room had been cleared in minutes. Stainless steel tables were wiped down, lamps repositioned, and boxes of emergency equipment shoved aside. The room smelled of disinfectant and cold metal. It had once been an old trauma bay, retired in favor of upgraded surgical suites, but tonight it was becoming something else. A battlefield operating room for a dog who had fought his own war. Dr. Claire Holloway, the town's only veterinarian, rushed in through the back door, her brown coat dusted with snowflakes that glittered in the fluorescent light. She was in her early 40s, tall, with a lean build and calm eyes that revealed years of experience calming both frightened animals and panicked pet owners. Her hair, a long chestnut braid, swung behind her as she dropped her medical bag on the counter. "I came as fast as I could," she said. "Show me the dog." Elias led her upstairs, his boots echoing sharply on the linoleum floor. When Claire saw Frost, she stopped mid-step. "Oh," she whispered, "you brave, broken thing." She knelt, examining the torn leg, the reopened wound on the shoulder, the spreading bruise beneath the fur. "How long has he been fighting like this?" "Since he found Lily," Elias answered. Claire exhaled. "Then he's running on nothing but loyalty." She looked up abruptly. "I need a sterile area, gauze, IV fluids for animals if you have them, and if not, saline for humans will do. Get me sutures, and get him downstairs. Now." Orderlies scrambled into motion, wheeling a stretcher to the room. Frost tried to lift his head but couldn't. His eyelids drooped, breath shortening. Lily leaned over the bed's edge. "Don't take him away," she whispered, panic rising. "Please don't take Frost." Claire softened. "Sweetheart, if we don't take him now, he won't make it. I promise we'll bring him back." Lily reached down with trembling fingers and brushed Frost's muzzle. "He said he wouldn't leave me." Her tears fell onto the dog's fur. Elias knelt beside her. "Frost is fighting, just like you, and fighters don't quit." Her breath shuddered. "Will he die?" The question pierced the air like a blade. Elias didn't answer immediately. His throat worked, words trapped behind emotion he hadn't let himself feel in years. Finally, he said softly, "Not if we can help it." And for once, the man who always carried calm had no calm left to carry. They wheeled Frost through the hallway, down to the improvised operating room. Nurses cleared the way with solemn expressions. Even patients peeked through doorways, sensing the gravity of the moment. No one knew the full story, but everyone understood. This dog had saved a child. Twice. When they reached the old trauma bay, Claire turned to Elias. "You can stay, but don't get in the way. I'll do everything I can." Elias nodded, jaw tight. Lily wasn't allowed inside. Security escorted her back upstairs, but she cried so hard that Karen stayed with her, whispering comfort as the girl curled into her arms like a shaking bird. The surgical room felt colder than the rest of the hospital. Shadows clung to the corners. A single bright lamp hung over the steel table where Frost was lifted, gently, reverently, by two orderlies. Claire pulled on gloves. "Scalpel." The assistant handed it to her. Elias stepped back, gripping the doorway until his knuckles whitened. Frost's breathing was shallow, raspy, each inhale sounding like a broken hinge trying to hold. Claire worked with fast, practiced precision. "He's lost a lot of blood. The wound reopened. Infection risk is high." Her words fell like fragments into the air, each one tightening Elias's stomach. After 20 minutes, Claire inhaled sharply. "He's crashing. More fluids." An assistant hurried to adjust the drip. "Heart rate unstable," Claire muttered. "Come on, boy. Stay with me." She stitched the torn muscle, wiped blood away, pressed gauze pads to stop the flow. Her voice remained steady, but her brow was damp, her eyes narrowed in concentration. Every few seconds Frost whimpered, a faint, thin whine that made Elias's chest ache. He had heard sounds like that before, on battlefields, in ruined buildings, from people he couldn't save. He pushed the memories away. Not now, not him, not tonight. Upstairs, Lily was curled up against Karen, rocking gently. Her voice trembled with each word. "He said he wouldn't let the dark take me. He stayed. He laid against me so I wouldn't freeze. Karen stroked her hair. "You're safe. Frost is strong. They're helping him." "But what if he doesn't come back?" Lily whispered. "Everyone leaves." Karen's heart tightened. Not everyone. But she knew the fear. She'd lived it as a child. And now she saw it echoed in this fragile girl who had already endured more than most adults ever did. Downstairs, Claire finally stepped back, removing her gloves with a long exhale. Elias's heart stopped. She looked up at him, sweat on her forehead, determination in her eyes. "He's not out of danger," she said, "but he has a chance. If he makes it through the night, his odds improve." Frost lay motionless, stitched, bandaged, connected to an IV. His chest rose with small, uneven breaths. But he was alive. Alive. For now. Elias exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Thank you." Claire shook her head. "Thank him. He did the impossible long before I got here." She left to scrub out. The assistants cleaned up. Lights dimmed, machines beeped softly, and Elias remained. He stepped closer, resting a hand lightly against Frost's back. "You did good," he whispered. "Rest now. You're safe." He closed his eyes, and for the first time in many years, Elias Turner prayed. Not with words, not with ritual, but with the quiet surrender of a man who had no control left and no defenses to hide behind. Upstairs, Karen tucked Lily into her bed again. "Frost will try his hardest," she promised. Lily wiped her face. "Can I see him later?" "When the doctor says it's safe." Lily clutched the blanket to her chest. Tell him I'm waiting." Karen nodded. Outside the hospital, snow drifted gently under the streetlights, a fragile dance of white against darkness. Coldwater Valley remained silent, watching, holding its breath. Downstairs, Frost slept beneath the cold glow of the surgical lamp. Upstairs, Lily dreamed restlessly. And between them, Elias stood in the quiet hallway, eyes closed, hand pressed against the wall, as if grounding himself against the weight of what almost happened. There were moments when a man had to admit he could not carry everything alone. Tonight was one of those moments. Winter in Coldwater Valley had always overstayed its welcome. It lingered like a lonely ghost, clinging to rooftops and riverbanks long after people were ready to breathe freely again. But on the morning Frost opened his eyes, something subtle shifted, something so delicate that only those who had suffered through the longest nights would notice it. Elias Turner had barely slept a single hour. He had spent the night sitting in a metal chair beside the veterinary emergency setup, his elbows on his knees and his head bowed, listening to the raspy rhythm of Frost's breathing. Every rise and fall felt like a decision made by the universe itself. Dr. Claire Holloway returned just after dawn. Her face wore the exhaustion of a woman who had been awake 20 hours, but when she looked at the monitors and examined Frost's stitches, a faint smile warmed the lines of her expression. "He made it," she said. "Pulse stronger, temperature stable. He's not out of the woods yet, but he's fighting, hard." Elias rested a hand gently on the dog's back. The fur felt warm for the first time in days. "You hear that, boy?" he whispered. "You're still here." Frost's tail gave a small, weak thump against the blanket. It was the softest victory Elias had ever witnessed. Upstairs in the pediatric ward, Lily Parker breathed in her first morning without fear. She lay tucked beneath her blankets, still pale but warmer, stronger. When Nurse Karen entered the room with a cup of warm oatmeal, Lily sat up so fast she nearly tipped the bed tray. "Is Frost okay?" she asked, the tremor in her voice revealing that this question had been waiting all night. Karen smiled. "He made it through surgery. He's sleeping right now." The relief that washed over Lily's face softened every remaining shadow of the trauma she had endured. She pressed her palms to her cheeks, holding back tears. "Can I see him?" she whispered. Karen hesitated, then nodded. "Just for a minute, and only if Sheriff Turner accompanies you." Lily nodded eagerly. She slid out of bed, her bare feet touching the cold floor with a small shiver. Karen wrapped her in a robe and helped her down the hall. Elias was just emerging from the surgical room when he saw them. "You're up early," he said softly. Lily didn't answer. She couldn't. Her eyes were fixed on the dog through the open doorway. Frost lay curled on the table, blanketed, stitched, breathing with slow determination. Lily stepped inside. The dog's ears twitched. He turned his head slightly, eyelids fluttering open. When he saw her, truly saw her, his tail moved again, this time with a little more strength. Lily pressed both hands against his muzzle, her forehead leaning gently against his. "You came back," she whispered. "You promised you wouldn't leave." Her tears fell silently onto his fur. The dog closed his eyes, not out of weakness, but out of peace. Elias stood in the doorway, feeling something expand inside his chest, a quiet ache, a profound admiration, and a sense of destiny he didn't dare name. In that moment, no one could deny the obvious. These two belonged to each other. 2 days later, social services arrived in Coldwater Valley. Ms. Evelyn Brooks, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and soft brown skin, greeted Elias with a firm handshake. Her warm voice and thoughtful eyes hinted at decades of guiding traumatized children through the aftermath of violence. "We've read the report," she said, flipping through the file. "And Lily's case is complex." Elias nodded. "I know." They walked to Lily's room, where the girl sat cross-legged on the bed, drawing pictures of Frost. Evelyn approached gently, sitting beside her. "Hi, Lily," she said. "My name is Evelyn. I'm here to help make sure you have a safe place to stay. Is that okay?" Lily looked at her, then at Elias. Her small fingers clutched the blanket tighter. "Can I stay with him?" she asked. "With Frost and Officer Turner?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She studied the drawings on Lily's lap. Children rarely lied with their art. Every page showed Frost standing between Lily and something dark. Some images had Elias in them too, always drawn in strong lines, always standing close. "Can I speak with you privately, Sheriff?" Evelyn asked. They stepped into the hallway. "You understand?" Evelyn began. "Guardianship typically requires background checks, home inspections, long paperwork." "He saved her," Elias said quietly. "They saved each other. You saw how she looked at him." "And how she runs to you," Evelyn replied. "She trusts you in a way she hasn't trusted adults in a very long time." Elias exhaled slowly. "I'm not asking to adopt her. I know the law. I'm asking for temporary guardianship until her long-term placement can be determined." Evelyn studied him for a long, thoughtful moment. Then she opened the folder again. "I've spoken with Dr. Hayes," she said, "with the psychologist, with the ICU nurses, and they all say the same thing. Lily sleeps only when Frost is nearby, and she feels safe only when you're in the room." She closed the folder with a soft click. "I'll authorize temporary guardianship, effective immediately, with mandatory review in 2 weeks. Elias released a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Thank you." Evelyn smiled. "This wasn't a difficult decision, Sheriff. Anyone who sees the three of you can tell you're already a team." 2 weeks passed slowly, each day a small step toward healing. Winter loosened its grip, snow melting off rooftops and dripping into gutters. Puddles formed on the sidewalks. Birds returned, filling the air with scattered chirps like hesitant notes of a song, long forgotten. And then, one thin morning touched with the promise of spring, Frost was allowed to walk outside. He limped, still stiff, but his coat shimmered again under the pale sunlight. His stitches tugged gently when he moved, but he held his head high, a quiet warrior returning from battle. Lily walked beside him, her small hand resting on his neck. The dog's tail thumped every time she giggled, a sound so new, so unexpectedly bright, that even Elias stopped to listen. They stepped into the yard behind the hospital, where patches of grass poked stubbornly through melting snow. The air was crisp, smelling of pine sap and thawing earth. Lily threw a soft foam ball gently across the yard. Frost hobbled after it, not with speed, but with undeniable joy. His paws splashed through melting snow, his ears flapping with each step. When he returned, Lily hugged him around the neck, burying her face into his thick fur. "You're my family," she whispered into his coat. "Forever." Elias watched them with a quiet nod. Not because of sentimentality, not because of the soft edge of sunlight warming his face, but because he knew, deep inside, that the girl was right. Family wasn't built by blood. Family was built in the storm, forged on nights when everything collapses and only love refuses to fall. And here, beneath a sky clearing after the longest winter, a new family had already begun. That evening, Elias drove them home, Lily in the passenger seat, Frost leaning gently against her shoulder from the back. Coldwater Valley stretched out before them, still wrapped in the last threads of winter, but ready for spring. And Elias Turner, who had once believed life had taken everything from him worth holding, realized something quietly miraculous. Sometimes the winter gives back, not loudly, not dramatically, but in gentle, unexpected ways, like a wounded dog stumbling out of the forest, like a frightened child learning to trust again, like a man discovering the shape of hope in two souls who needed him as much as he needed them. The valley breathed, the snow melted, and for the first time in a very long time, Elias felt the season changing inside himself too. This story reminds us that God's miracles do not always arrive with thunder or bright signs. Sometimes they come quietly through the courage of an officer who refuses to give up, through the loyalty of a dog who keeps fighting to return home, and through the kindness that rises in ordinary people when they choose love instead of fear. In our everyday lives, we face storms of our own moments when we feel tired, lonely, or unsure of what tomorrow will bring. But even in those seasons, God walks beside us. He guides our steps, protects our families, and sends help in ways we often recognize only afterward. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Leave a comment to tell us your thoughts, and remember to subscribe for more stories of hope, courage, and faith. May God bless you and your loved ones with peace, protection, and strength wherever you are watching from. And if you believe in the gentle miracles He sends, type Amen in the comments.